gold and wake up as a pauper. We all get old, we all slow down as the walls they close. We fall, we drown, and I need some breathing space. I won't grow old with grace. I need some breathing space. I can't keep living straight. Oh, we ain't gonna linger and lie when there's hard cash coming back. No way, I'll just sit here when I know that there's hard cash coming back. Hard cash. Don't want no easy money. Oh no. Money couldn't buy me happiness, just a prettier misery. There's a price to pay for a life of luxury. Oh, the air is thin, the glare, the smoke, and the wear within. It tears, it's choking. I need some breathing space. I won't grow old with grace. I need some breathing space. I can't keep living straight. Oh, we ain't gonna linger and lie when there's hard cash coming back. No way, I'll just sit here when I know that there's hard cash coming back. Hard cash. We ain't gonna linger and lie when there's hard cash coming back. We ain't gonna linger and lie when there's hard cash coming back. No way, I'll just sit here when I know that there's hard cash coming back. Hard cash. Don't want no easy money. Oh no. And now that we have all arrived, my friends, get in your cars and drive. And now that we have all arrived, my friends, get in your cars and drive. Gonna drive our blues away. Just another sunny day. Gonna drive our blues away. Just another sunny day.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Blazor State Has Changed. We've got a Blazor workshop going on another channel on Twitch on C# Twitch. C# Twitch, that may be his new name. C# Fritz on his Twitch channel. He's doing a Blazor workshop right now. Very good content. He's in the beginning stages of it, so if you're familiar with the entry-level stuff, then it's probably good that you stop by for a little bit so we can dig into some of the cascading drop-down stuff that we were working on last week, or Wednesday. It got a little hectic for a few minutes. I did some research, and I think I know what is wrong, and I don't know if it's a bug. I don't think so. I don't think it's a feature that's been implemented. We'll talk about it. I'll dig into the code here in a minute so we can understand what went wrong and why I assumed it was going to work the way it did. Let's go ahead and jump over. We've got folks joining us now in the chat room, so appreciate you guys coming out on this wonderful Friday and a very Blazor Busy Friday at that. I don't have any news today. I'm going to skip through it and save it for next week when I think there'll be more folks here in the chat room. I'd hate for people to miss out on all these wonderful links that I have, but I do have some news to share. I'll pile those all up and we'll do those next Friday, and I'll make a nice big blog post about that again. So let's jump over to my coding window here. Let's see. We worked on these drop-down lists last week, and what I discovered was something that, once again, I think I already knew, but it's one of those things I just keep testing because I expect these things to work from the framework, and I don't know if it's something that will be implemented or not. I'm wondering if I'm just getting ahead of myself and this is going to end up being a feature that's implemented, or it's just the way it's supposed to work. So I'm going to have to talk to some folks, but I think I did enough research to get an educated opinion of what's happening here. Let's get this app up and running. It is a little sluggish for some reason, not uncommon with all of the Blazor framework and app and OBS, which is my streaming program, all of that stuff running. Maybe if I take this enabled preview thing offline here, that seems to help with performance a little bit. I'm going to have to get another machine to help me with the streaming stuff here pretty soon. The one I've got is Surface Pro 2, Surface Book 2. It seems to handle itself pretty well until I start throwing crazy stuff at it, like live streaming, Visual Studio Preview with Blazor applications running. Anyhow, this is the app that we have so far, and we were working on these drop-down boxes right here. And what is happening is I have this cascading effect where if I select this drop-down box, it affects this one. And the second box uses data binding. And unfortunately, if we do any type of event that causes this page to refresh, I will click on some passengers here. You'll see this other box the value just vanishes from it. Anything I do kind of makes that happen. So I looked into this a little bit, and what it is that data binding doesn't seem to be supported within a component itself. It's only available to the topmost level of the component. So I can use binding on my index page. I can say at bind here and do data binding that way, but that does not work within the actual component that I'm using, and that's where I've added it. So I have inside of that component I just showed you on my index page, I have a second drop down that says bind value, and I'm handling that through data binding. And I'm not able to pass through this data binding from the child component that I'm in to the parent's page or parent component, the index page up here. Even if I, selected value, even if I do it here like this and say bind to the port selected value. I've tried passing that through by adding a bind directive to my custom component. That did not work as well. So it just doesn't pass through any type of data binding. So what we have to do is actually handle all of the logic manually, which isn't that bad. And I don't know if this is just the way the framework is intended to be used, or if it just hasn't been enabled yet, or if it is something that will come later on. I need to chat with some folks and see what their opinion is on what to expect from data binding. Should we be able to do this at the top level or not? So WonderCon, no, actually, I don't need a JavaScript interop for it. It has, it's nothing to do with the way it's being rendered or anything like that. It's just the way the framework works right now. Take the Scott approach and blog from the past. Yeah, so what we'll end up doing is just handling this just the way we did the first drop-down list. And then I've got another question here. Is there a way to get the selected row of an HTML table using Blazor? HTML, an HTML table? Not really. It's possible that you could do something with a component inside of it. And then on the click event of that row, yeah, I guess you could. Let's take a look, actually. It's a good question. This is really easy to do with the Telerik UI components. Oops, I don't want... no, another Visual Studio. Let's try this. Let's see if we can do this in Blazor Fiddle. It's a great question, by the way. Do we have under examples fetch data? Let's try that. All right, and can we run this? And loading. So this is Blazor Fiddle. This is a really cool project that lets you tinker with Blazor code right in the browser. So I don't know if you have seen all of this before. Oh, I got you, Wintergata. I can't pronounce this name, by the way. ML Milhira? I don't know. I'm giving it a shot. What can I say? So we have this table, and we can for each through it. One thing that we would need to do if we're going to select it is possibly add something like a button in here. And we could say button. Select and the button, and then we have a button now, so we can run that. And I'll show you a much better way to do this after we're done. If you're using Blazor for something at work, I would highly suggest saving yourself a boatload of time and getting the Telerik UI for Blazor, and it will do a lot of this stuff for you out of the box. If it's for a personal project that you're just tinkering with, then this should be okay. So now we have a select button in every row here. I didn't put a header. Let's not be too lazy here. We'll give it a header so it just lines up nicely. And then on our button, what we need to do is we need to give it an event. So we'll say @onClick. And then on that event, what we do is pass in a lambda expression, and that lambda expression will then handle that event. So what we'll do is put an event handler here. So we'll say public void on handle click, and we will then accept a value as a string, and that will be the selected value. So hopefully you can see this well on the stream. We'll zoom in a little bit here. So we've got a function now called handle value, and then we can accept a value there. Let's give this somewhere to render out. Oh, I am in the wrong file. This is startup. How did I end up in startup? I want to be in... I just needed to scroll down a little bit. So we'll handle that there. Sorry, a little thrown off by the way these panes show up. I wish there was a way to make some of those panes go away. I don't think there is. Nope, that doesn't seem to do anything. All right, so we've got our handler now that we can tie to our click event, and then what we'll say is on handle click, and then pass in, say, a value that we know from the data we're assigning to this. So we can say forecast dot we can, there's no unique identifier in this, but we would normally want to put like an ID here. Let's see, they're all different dates. So that's something we can uniquely identify this by. So we'll just take the date. We'll pass the date along to our handler. Don't need that extra @ symbol in there. So now when we click on it, it's going to pass the date to this function. Oops, I did it again. It's going to pass the date to this handle click function, and then we can do something with that. So we can come up in the top here and just write out a h2 tag or something, and selected value, print that out there. And we need to set up a placeholder for that called selected value. Whoops, this is going to be a string called selected value. And we'll default this to select an item. So really good question off top of the show. So I just wanted to, oops, and I keep Control-S-ing to hit save. I wanted to address this real quick. Oddly enough, this says function still. I guess this hasn't been quite as updated as I thought it would be. We can run this now. We should be able to select the item, and it'll print the actual date that we selected up at the top. And that should actually do what we needed to. Build failed. Build failed. However, strings to start with that. It's something to do with our click event here. Let's see if we can figure this one out. Something doesn't have a matching end tag. I didn't close my h2 tag. Thank you. Yep, I totally glanced past that. It's probably because I keep hitting Control-S by just muscle memory. Every time I type, I hit Control-S. Build failed again. Build failed again. Why did that fail again? And let's see. Does it have something to do with the on-click event? I may be writing this in a way that is not compatible with this version of Blazor. Let's try saving this. Build failed. Run it. Let's see if I can kick this back off. Blazor's updated to 0.7. Yeah, I don't know why that's a function block. It should be a code block. I don't know. Maybe this example's outdated. Run. At least I got a fresh build this time. Nope, something still is unhappy. Strings that start with @ and quotation marks must span multiple lines. What? Let's try taking that off. That seemed to do the trick. We may not have needed that @ symbol there. It was understood that it was a function. And now, if we hit select, oh, it didn't work. That's about the gist of it, though. So as you iterate over each line, then you assign it the value. So this would be something like an ID or whatnot. Don't know what's quite going on in here. So let's see if I can figure this out real fast. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's happening. Let me make sure I've got the right syntax here. So if I add this is just my project here. I'll hack away at it for 1 sec. Button on click. So maybe is it the on click doesn't need the @ symbol? I thought it was, yeah, it should be @ on click and then @ doot function arrow do a thing. So yeah, I've got that right. I don't know what the issue is on Blazor Fiddle, but it doesn't seem to care for this. But this should work. And then I can show you another example of this. If we go to demos.telarc.com, we want the Blazor UI demos, Blazor UI. I've got a similar demo out here that I've built. And you can do even custom forms that pop up with the same concept. So on click, we pass in the selected product. And then what happens is when we hit edit, we actually have a form that pops up here, and we can say, hello, Blazor fans, as the product name, hit save, and then we go back. You can see that that has persisted up here. So it's the same concept. This is just using the teller grid instead of an HTML grid. And we have a template row, and that row has a button that simply passes in a function that we handle that has an argument, which is an ID we can queue off of. So that's how you do it. The Control S impulse is real, yeah. So you can add an on-click event to the entire row. Yes, you can do that. You can add an on-click event to an entire row. Just be very careful for accessibility reasons when you do that. So let's go back to Blazor Fiddle real quick, just so I can point this out. If you're going to do the entire row, when you do on-click here, you want to ensure that people can get the accessibility cues from it. You want to make sure you say role equals button, I believe is what it is. There's a whole article as to why you may not want to do that. Let's see, button, HTML button versus on click. Buttons versus anchors. When to use the button element. I think this might be the article here. There's a lot of stuff that you get for free is the gist of why use a button over tying a on-click event to random HTML elements. Let's see if, yeah, accessibility. Yep, role button is what you want to make sure you add. You still don't get everything from the accessibility profile of a button by doing that, so there's other things that you may need to add there as well. So you need to add that. You won't get a cursor that changes and some other things that belong to a button. So yep, make sure you keep that in mind. But yes, you can put it on click there. Whether or not it's best practices is debatable. But at least, at the very least, make sure you put the role equals button on that row. So good stuff. Great questions, guys. Awesome. So get back to this, I guess, here. This second drop-down box we're handling through data binding. It does not keep the value. Every time I click anything else, it disappears. It just doesn't persist that with that bind directive. So I took it out. And I need to do the same thing I did up here for the first drop-down box. And that is I need to have a value expression. This is a bug that will get fixed in about a week, so we won't need this line anymore from what I understand. This will be a the port selected value, and then the value changed event, we will change this to handle on port changed. Oops. Port changed. We need to actually write this event handler up. We don't have that yet. We didn't have one because we were using data binding. So what we need is another event callback. We'll duplicate this one. And this one is going to be called on port changed. And then we need to copy this guy. I'm just using this as a kind of a cheap template here on port changed. And then we need to raise the event to the parent. Pass up that selected value. and then it will be able to handle that. So now we can tie into an event, and we'll get rid of this bind here. We're not going to use bind. That doesn't seem to actually do anything. Next, we need to assign that on port changed event. And again, we don't have one yet. So we'll just write it out here. But when we do change it, we need to actually do something with it. So we need to go to our code behind. And it's going to be very simple. I think we're just going to set a value here. We don't even need to do an async here, actually. It's going to be on port changed. It's going to take a string of selected value. So we're going to pass in, this needs to be protected. So we will take in that port change, and then on our form, we will then set the selected port of entry, or port of travel to the selected value. And that should satisfy our problem there. This needs to be a void. We're not returning anything from this function. It will just be void. We're not doing any database work or anything like that, so it can be void. It doesn't need to be async task. It's just setting a form value. We need to do another one for destination. So we will have, let's see, we have on port change. That needs to be named a little better, I think. We will just change this down here to be very similar. And this one will be on port change. This will be instead on destination port change. On destination port change. This one should be on departure port change, because we have two different events we're handling here. So let's go back to our code again, do a little rename. This will be on departure port change. We will make a copy because we also have a destination, because we have two of these. There are two separate events that handle two separate values. On selected destin, nope, on port of entry. There it is. So that actually, I'm going to rename this one more time. You know what? Yeah, naming things is hard, guys. Naming things is terribly hard. So I'm going to rename this one more time. Port of entry changed. And this will be on port of entry change. Port of entry changed. There we go. On departure port changed. On. There we go. That should do it. Pizza as a deliverable. Gotcha. All right. Take care. We'll see you again sometime soon, I'm sure. Thanks for coming back and visiting the show today. We've got, let's see, we got 10 people in the chat room. That's good. That's good. We've got everything wired up now. I think this will persist our data now. That's what's important, is that we persist that data. And let's see what we get. Spin this guy back up. All right, it always likes to come up off screen. I don't know why, but it does. All right, we've got Earth. We select a value. Nothing is broken here so far. That's a good sign. Select that item. It's still there. So we fixed that issue. And now we've got everything we need, except Something's still hanging here somewhere. We did fix this issue though, so that's good. We're not executing our estimate trip cost for some reason when I click on this button. So I don't know if there's a validation problem or what is happening. So let's take a quick look at on estimate trip cost. We will put a breakpoint here and see if we're hitting it at all. Because we're using client-side Blazor, or server-side Blazor, I mean, we can set a breakpoint. We're not hitting that breakpoint, so I'm not sure why that is. All the validation seems to be passing, so what is the deal with our edit form that it doesn't hit our on valid submit? Let's double check this. Let's do a quick look and see if we can do a on what is the name? Oh, I didn't need an @ symbol. It is on invalid submit. We'll do an on invalid submit and see if this is triggering. And to do that, we just need a quick event to wire up. I'm just going to temporarily name it just to make sure there's no validation that's not displaying. Call it invalid submit. We don't really need to pass anything to it. We'll just put this here. We'll do a console dot. Do we not have console? Console. We don't have using system. Console dot write line. We'll write this out. If we even hit this, we'll just set a breakpoint just in case. Not sure what exactly is happening. Oops, I never wired it up. I'm going to get a build fail. Yep, I get it. I get it. I get it. I didn't put anything there. On valid submit, or on invalid submit rather, is on invalid. Oops, invalid. Did I not make it public or protected? Let's see. Invalid submit. Nope, it is public. Invalid submit. There we go. IntelliSense didn't want to help me for some reason. Sometimes I rely on IntelliSense too much. So let's see. We're going to run this again. We'll see if we hit that breakpoint. If we do, that means we have some validation that is not being shown to us, even though the form is invalid. So I'll explain how that works in just a second, in case you're new to the input form. Let's check this, and boom, it does hit. So something is invalid on our page. Let's see if what we're getting here. Our passenger count is good. Payment type is good. Trip distance is good. Vendor is good. Rate code's good. So let's figure out which of our form values is invalid. Something isn't validating correctly. Something is not happy. So we have validation. This is interesting. So we have these validators on our input boxes. I'm wondering if they're not showing for some reason. They have a validation message. If this value is an empty string, it should not be valid. They are not empty strings though, so I'm wondering what it is. We could put a summary up here. This is why the summaries are actually kind of helpful sometimes. Validation summary. We'll put a validation summary up, and if the validation summary catches anything, it should write it out. And we may need to rebuild here. Let's see if this does anything. Yeah, we need to rebuild this. Rebuild. Yes, I want to stop debugging. We'll fire this back off, and this will write out what's not validating. I have a feeling we're still dealing with some issues of that drop-down box. So the idea was to put these in a child component so we didn't have to deal with making two of these, and it seems like it may have caused more problems than it solved. It happens. Did this rebuild yet? It did not. Try running it one more time. And we'll see what happens here. So I've been working on some new GIFs for the show. It may be time to start debuting some of these if we don't get a... So there we go. There's all of our invalid states. That makes sense. They should start going away as I select things. Let's see. We'll select Earth. This has a selected value that has not gone away yet. This has a selected value, and port of entry is required. Port of entry, I know what it is. So this one here, I selected something off of the list that wasn't the default. This is kind of an annoyance. So it can't be empty. So I can't select something like this. That obviously should show up as a required field. But when I have a default item here, it's still, there's no select event that has taken place to clear that out. So it always shows up. So I need some kind of item in here, a placeholder item, that will show up and force me to select an item from it, which is kind of annoying. And I don't know why it does that, because maybe I need to, when my destination changes, I need to actually go in and set this value. Let's try that first. So when we select a port, or no, we actually are doing that. We are selecting that value from that list. So why doesn't it validate? It's a good question. Maybe because it is the same value that was the default value. That could be. These drop-down lists are kind of tricky to validate sometimes. So here's what's happening, I believe. When we have this drop-down list, even these only have one item in them. But you don't want the user to have just fix the code. Yeah, so we need to identify the problem. And what it is there's only one item in the list. So what the validator may be doing is it sees that the default is value of 14, and it thinks that there's no selection happening because the selected value is also the default value. So trying to think what we need to do. We either need to take the validator off and do some kind of custom validation here. Yeah, that's probably the only resolution that we'll have, because I can't think of another way that we can do that. We can try taking off the empty string. Allow empty strings is false. That is there to force somebody to take and make a selection. Let's see if this does anything to help us. It may just remove the requirement altogether, which also wasn't the intent. So let it spin back up. I did that on selected destination. It's odd that the one, well, no, it's not. So, oh, that's, thank you, Visual Studio, but I don't want your pop-up menu over the top of everything. So if I select this item, let's hit submit here. Selected port of travel is required. So yeah, that didn't help. That did not help. It's still throwing that required error on my screen here. Yep, it's not gonna go away no matter what. I need to put a value in there, and it can't be the default item. So let's put this back, because we're gonna end up having to write a value in there. I have to stop this from running. These things are definitely tricky. What we'll probably have to do is, if they're oh, we're on the wrong one here. If I scroll down, if their ports are null, you need to select a location. If they are not null, then we need to write another option here that will say select a port. This will force the user to select a port. Let's start with that. And then what we may need to do is try to make this a little bit easier for the user, is manually or automatically select the first item off of that list, or the second item rather. But it has to have a default value, otherwise it will not work. So now let's trigger the validator so we can see them all. If we select the moon, it says select a port. Now we have to select a port. Let's try triggering that validator again. That did work. It goes away. And boom, we have all of our validators satisfied. And we could submit the form, and there's our price. However, now we've added another step. Every time somebody selects an item here, well, that one didn't do it. Let's see what happens. It is going to prove me wrong now. And oddly enough, it is setting them by default. So let's rerun the app. If I select Earth, it forces me to select a port. If I select a port, I'm good. If I select the moon, forces me to select a port, then I have to do that. Let's see if we can fix that. What we could probably do is say that when we hit the selected, oh, I don't know if that'll work. So when there's only, yeah, we have to have a default item in the box. Because what the validator does when we put required on a drop-down list item, what it does is it looks at, let's do this form here. When we put this required field here, it looks for the string, and it says, is the string the initial value of that input? So when the string is the initial value of the input, then it is seen as the required field hasn't been validated. So we haven't changed that selection to another item. And since it is the default value, then the required validator then feels as if no input has been made. So the requirement has been met. So it throws an error, And now we're caught with either forcing the user to select an item to clear that validator or remove the validator. And I don't know if there's a way to bypass this. What we could try, and let me get back to, let's do a little tab bankruptcy here. Close all but this. When I select the first item on location changed, what I want to do then is I'm going to go through and select or call to my database and get the ports by location and set that drop-down box. When I set that value for the drop-down box, what I want to do is, whoops, I need to stop running again. I need to probably just run without debugging, and then I won't run into this as often. And I can just code away, and I won't run into these issues with it barking at me. So I can say that the form selected port of travel is then equal to departure ports. Give me the first item. Actually be 0 in this case. And is that going to, cannot convert to a string? That is because I need the ID number and toString. So when I grab my list, I'm going to find the first item, get the ID from it, set that value of the selected port of travel, and then what it's going to do is, even though my default value, let's look at the component, even though the default value is an empty string, it's going to end up selecting the first available item after this, so that should get around the validator. It will still have a select a port option, but it will not be noticed by the user unless they specifically go back and choose it. Or we could write a custom validator that looks for a specific value, or it looks for a null. So if I do Earth, it automatically picked Cape Canaveral. If I do the moon, I haven't edited this one yet. So let me go back to the moon, Sea of Tranquility. So now I just need to do the same thing for the next drop-down box. So when I change my destination, then what would probably be nice is a validator that just worked with drop-down boxes. So I'm going to take the form and choose a selected point of entry, make that equal to my destination ports, first item 0, ID number toString. And of course there is room for error here. If for some reason there were no ports, this would fail as a null reference exception. So there is room for error in here. We're going to assume that there's always going to be a selection for now. So if you're getting some ideas for improving your select component, then that is awesome. I'm glad you're learning something, or at least getting some ideas here. So let's take a look. We will run this again, select Earth, boom, select the moon, boom, nope. Why didn't it pick a default item? I'm not quite sure. That didn't work. Did I handle the wrong event maybe? Did I mistype something? Yep, I sure did. Destination ports, first item. So it was trying to select an item off that list that didn't exist. I I put the wrong value in there, referenced the wrong list. So I selected the first item off of a list that was a different list. So it couldn't actually populate the component. Typos matter. Typos matter. I mean, obviously that was a problem, says Hacker Man. I hope that meme showed up. I can't. I turned my preview off. This is awesome. Okay. Never mind. That's the same comment from before. Something was partially covering it. I was like, this is awesome. Me failing hard is awesome. All right. Let's see. All right, now it's working. So cool. These show up, by the way. I just added these. So obviously we've got it now. It should have been obvious to us from the beginning. And now we can do our price estimation, and we don't have those odd validators. But notice if we go back here, we can invalidate this, and boom. Why would anybody do that on purpose? I don't know. But it's there to catch the folks that want to try to trip up our form. So now we've got our complete drop-down experience working. And we've got a little bit of a complex thing, actually, that ended up happening here. And that is when I select a departure, not only is it tied to the port, it's also tied to the destination, because I didn't want people to have to choose from something that was already selected up here, and then that would cause some weird behavior. So it removes Earth from this list. And then I only have the options that are left. So it's kind of a multi cascading experience here. So there's actually 4 boxes that are all keeping in sync with each other. And then we fixed the validation problem. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that validation thing here, just so we have a place to come back. One thing I did want to check, but place I'd come back and hit a breakpoint. One thing I did want to check is I have a perfectly good validation message right here that was not showing up, and I don't know why. Do we have to wait until we press the estimated cost button, or do we get an update in real time when valid? That is a good question. So right now, when we fill out the form, don't know why I'm hitting breakpoints. When we fill out the form, we have to hit submit. And if we hit it too early, we get validation errors, which I'm still not sure why those don't show. We'll get to that in a minute. But we have to click on estimate trip cost. I don't know if there's a way to trigger a submit by other means. That's an excellent question, though. So the only 2 methods the edit form provides are on valid submit and on invalid submit. Or there is a third option, which is on submit. But all of 3 of these methods require us to have a submit button. We could tie it to an event handler of some sort. So on any type of change, you could add an href and call it, or not a href. Yeah, we could reference it and call it programmatically. The Blazing Pizza Workshop does it. Does it though? Don't recall it. I don't recall it submitting anything automatically. I know it's changed also a little bit from. So those aren't forms though. I think is what you're talking about. Those aren't actual forms. Um, there are things that will data bind automatically on input. So what we could do is on all of the events that take place, and this would get rather messy. What would happen is every time we change a value in any of these fields, it would have to attempt to call this. So if this is an expensive service to perform computationally, or just the service call itself through the HTTP request is a long thing to do. So let's say I have passengers, right? And I have this nice little tick box, and I start just ramping it up, clicking up and down. I've got a limit of 5 passengers, so I can't go too bananas with it. But if I have something like this, what happens is it starts calling the service on every single change. So I'm going to click, and it's going to be changing this price also. But that takes a split second. There's a small cost to go get this price. In the case of the price here, it's coming from a machine learning service. In other instances, this might be an HTTP request. So you don't want somebody just hammering away with every little click. So then what you have to do is you have to poll. And you have to say, so I actually have an example of this. So it's a great question and observation. So I'm glad you brought it up. So I'm not like trashing your idea by any means. It's a great topic. So blaze down. This is a experiment that I did early on in Blazor, and you can get to it yourself. It is hosted online through that link right there. So this is a markdown editor that runs completely client side. And what I can do in here, let's clear this out, and you'll notice this doesn't change right away. Matter of fact, it's not changing at all. Why is that? I had this problem yesterday. There it goes. Okay, so now it changed. So now when we type in here, hello world, this is an online markdown editor. And notice it's a little slow. It's not lag. This has nothing to do with performance. This is on purpose. Because what I'm doing is I'm parsing text from Markdown into HTML, and it can be a rather expensive operation. So if I'm doing it on literally every single keystroke, then what happens is I end up just choking the Markdown engine to where it can't parse anymore, because it's parsing this entire document, every single letter. So then it's parsing from here to here, and then it has to parse E and whatever comes next, and it chokes really, really bad. So what's cool is if we go to GitHub, you can actually grab the source code for this. I wrote a very, whoops, that's GitHub. I wrote a very simple debouncer that takes care of it. And you can see it in here. It may not be the best way to write a debouncer. I don't know. I've never really done one in .NET before because, well, Blazor didn't exist until recently. So there hasn't been a need for anything like this. It was done in JavaScript before. And what this does, it may be in one of the components here. And shared, it is in the editor, I believe. Yep. So I set up a timer. So the timer is guess 1 second actually. Is that 1 second or 10 seconds? I can't remember how to. These are milliseconds. And then what it does is when it detects the input has changed, it then looks to see if there is a timer, and it starts a new one if there isn't one. If there is one, it extends the time. So it is it's throttling. So what it does is it starts at I think it's 1 second. So it gives you 1 second to stop typing. If you keep typing, it keeps triggering this to be 1 second. And then once it finally stops, it holds on to an event that invokes that on change and passes the final value. So it's caching all of your changes, and as you're extending that timer, it's caching every change you make. And then when you finally settle down and stop typing, it takes, sliding window is the right term for that. So that's what it actually does. So when the sliding window has finally completed, the final cached value then triggers, and it sends the update to the UI. I think you could actually do this with RX or reactive extensions. That's probably not where I want to go. Nah, that's bad. RX space.net. You could probably do it with reactive extensions. However, I didn't want to pull in an entire library to do this for one simple demo component. So you could probably do that with RX, but if you're building an app that's got it everywhere, you could probably just pull in RX and use something out of reactive extensions. Since it is a single example on a demo of an experimental framework at the time, I figured I would just write a simple timer and take advantage of it there. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. I would have to have something like that fire on every change of every field, so I don't pollute my system with calls to my machine learning model. So I would have to kind of wait for the user to settle on some values and then update it after they settle, after that sliding window finishes timing out. So it's a good UX idea, but implementing it might be more trouble than it's worth. And then some of this form, we're going to do like a UX review on this whole thing later. Once we get, this is our, what's the term I'm looking for? Proof of concept, our POC done. We're going to do, I'll use another corporate term, the minimum viable product is ready. Then we'll go back and say, how can we make these things easier? We'll probably be pulling in the Telerik UI here. We might eliminate some of these drop-down boxes with things like geolocation. We'll probably get a calendar up here instead of selecting a single date. Stuff like that will help. And we're just trying to make sure we can provide a set of inputs, provide an output, and then we will beautify the app, do a UX run through on it, and make it operate nicely. Has Telerik fixed their select list? Last I checked, it was broken. So I think the thing you're talking about is actually the issue that we ran into on the show. So the Blazor one is broken as well, which in turn makes ours broken because we are trying to follow the framework guidelines. And if you look in our docs, the select list, or how did we name it, is not select list, drop down list. We have a warning on it, and this will be fixed next week. So this is a .NET Core issue. that you can alleviate, but it's really messy. So yeah, this is what is broken. And what we're doing, we could actually do this with the Telerik one as well. If we look at the drop down list here, what we have to have is this value expression, which I don't think most people are going to think is intuitive. And this goes away in the next version. So we should be able to just specify a value in a change event, which I don't think should be this verbose either. But anyhow, you should be able to specify these two and not this third one. But our Telerik UI components, they actually tap into the form, the edit form, and they experience the same problem as the Blazor select list does. So we also have a little bit of an issue here, which may be related. It may be a similar problem. So I've taken this set of UI components and I've wrapped them in a component, and it doesn't seem like my validation message wants to, it doesn't seem like it wants to cooperate. So I'm wondering if this actually needs to be outside of our input, or our set of inputs. So what we probably need to do here is take this out completely. So these validations, they don't display for some reason. I'm going to take them out. And instead of having them there, what I'm going to do is put them, oh no, that's not going to display in the right location, is it? Because they need to be inside of the form group. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I may just leave the summary up. So that's going to be something that I look at later, is why those don't work. They don't seem to operate if they're not at the parent level. So I will have to do some digging. Because these have these form groups, I guess I could put a child. That's going to be messy. I could put a child render fragment area here and write them out that way, but then I might as well just put everything back on the main page. I don't know. This I think I'm happy with for now. I don't mind the validation summary being there. Yeah, I don't have an issue with the way it's written, but when you take the validation message and you put it inside of a child component, it just doesn't seem to trigger. I think it has to be part of a form, and it can't get visibility into the form the way the property is being passed through. So these messages don't show. So even when they're invalid, it doesn't seem to be showing. It doesn't like this, this value I'm giving it. I'm trying to pass it in from the parent, and it doesn't do anything. So if I go back here, let this guy run, I should have a validation message that shows beneath. See how this one comes up under passenger? There should be one under port of travel and departure. They're not showing up, and I think it's because of the way the value is being passed into the form, or the child component. So we can look, there's no, whoops, that's the wrong one. The form, it's coming up as valid here. Form control valid. So validation doesn't seem to pass through to a child component either. Interesting. I thought that would work because of the the cascading nature of it. Yeah, so this is a, hey, Peter Morris. Yeah, this is a child component inside the edit form. So we have the edit form. Edit forms on the page level. So here's the edit form. Then we have a couple inputs that are normal inputs. But then I have this location dropdown. This is a custom component that has input components in it. So it doesn't seem like it passes through the validation property. So I'm setting it here with the for property. When I set that parameter, I'm setting it to a property that I have down here, which then in turn gets set by the parent. So the parent is passing down which value it wants to validate. And the values don't seem to jive. It doesn't seem to care. It never shows the validation message. Even though the validation is invalid, it still says valid, but the validator triggers and won't let you submit the form. So it's very confusing. Show the parent again? Sure. So I've got, this is at the page level. And then I have my edit form. Inside of the edit form, here is that child component right here. This is essentially two drop-down lists that are cascading to one another. So this is where the child component is, and then inside that child component is the validation. And to set that value, I have a property on the component to pass that value through. And as I talk about it, I think I may actually know what's wrong here. This might actually need to be, so this is a string. What I might actually need to do is pass through an expression instead. I wonder if I'd be able to do that instead. So that's going to move my, let's see. But that would then make the, I'd have to specify the validation up here. Yeah, I would have to put it there. I think I just figured it out. So the validation attribute isn't sitting on that string I'm passing in. I'm passing through the wrong information, and I can't get it that way. What I would have to do is have to have a validation field or something like that, and I would have to set it here. This kind of gets a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, I think, because the validation message has this validation message of T. So this should be a system link expression of system func. So it's an expression of func of T. Expression, I'd have to bring in that namespace. Really, come on. System dot link dot expressions expression. Why won't it just let me pull the names? Oh, I forgot. It is a razor feature to get that using statement. So it would be expression of func of T would have to be here to make this the right. Oops, I'm doing this wrong. I can't use the string is the point. Get this back to normal here. I'd have to have another parameter. And this would have to be an expression of, oh, come on. IntelliSense. Let's see. Let's see here. We need using. I just want to see if this works. I don't know if this is the approach I'd want to use or not, but out of curiosity. I mean, there's a couple ways I could skin this cat. I could use that. And this is an expression of func of t. And then it would be the validation for, let's just call it that, validation for missing a closing bracket. Yep. It's T of P? Was it really? So let's look. System.expression of T. Where's the return value coming from? I'm not seeing that. What is T in this instance? Why am I not getting... Expression of func of T, and why am I getting T is not found? T is types a string instead of T. Ah, okay. So it's T source, T property. And it's not going to let me... So I just start reinventing the wheel at this point, I think. So if I have to do all of that, I might as well just write all of these inputs twice. So it gets to be a little monotonous. So if I end up having to repeat this and put that here, so if I end up with validation, or I'll just say for, and then I put an expression here. If I have to do that, then I've already copied like every one of these things. I might as well just go back to putting the entire darn thing on the page. Ah, you do that. I didn't know that. So it will accept a string there? For let's see. So the thing is, I don't have the form here, so it actually would have to be a string here, which it doesn't like. So that's what I was passing before, is the string. So the string is actually selected port of whatever. It's going to be... Oh, actually, no, I did have that wrong. Selected port of entry. So it's not letting me do a string. Yeah. Let's see. So that's actually the problem, is I don't have the form in here. What you know what would work? This actually would have been a lot easier, I think. I might have done this a little bit ham-handed. Instead of getting selected values and whatnot, and then passing them back up to the form, what if I do this? So I'm passing in the form here and here. This is very specific to my app. It is not a generic thing by any means. So what I should probably be doing here, and this would fix it. This would fix it. I think you helped me solve this. Para tab. Form. What's my form called again? It is a trip configuration. Let me get the namespace. I'll just pass the form down. Data, location details, trip configuration. So it is trip configuration. So it is a trip configuration. I'll put the using statement here instead. Data dot, or no, models dot form models. Then I have my trip configuration here. I broke my validation message. Still don't have it. Why? Models, form models. Yeah, I should have that. Models, form models. Trip configuration. Why can it not be found? Trip configuration. Did I misspell it? Probably. So I'll just pass my form along. And then my selected value is now form dot selected departure. And the value expression now changes to selected departure. I can keep that handle method the same. The validation is now for it is a open lambda expression with no parameter that is of form selected departure. That should do it. And then I would need to do the same here. Form selected destination. This gives me less information I need to have as properties too. Let's give this a try. And of course I could have just broke everything. Entry. Oh wait, no, I can't do this. What am I thinking? Yeah, that doesn't work either. I gotta undo all this. I suck. That's a bad idea. So the idea was to make the set of components generic. Maybe they're not generic is the problem. They're not generic enough. Yeah, I can't do that. I cannot do that because they are, then I'll just end up creating 4 of them inside of here. So I've hit that chicken and egg moment. I really have. The validation message can't be in here. I can't pass that information through. If I do, I end up creating... Yeah, exactly. I probably should just... Yeah. So, I do have part of this online. Yeah, that is the actual, you got the problem nailed, Peter. So the value it's passing is not the correct one. So the value that gets passed for the validation message is not the property name. And therefore it doesn't validate at all, and I hit my issue. So what I will probably do, I think I'll leave this one alone. I'm going to take the validation out and leave it at the top level with a validation summary, because the form itself still gets validated properly, and it shows up in the validation summary. What I can't do is pass it in without a bunch of extra fields and namespaces. Don't really want to do that. What I probably needed to do, yeah, is go for the input base like you said. I may run into some more issues though with input base, because if I do input base, then I end up with, I have two components. Yeah, another thing I can do is make it a child component, or I mean a render fragment, but still, I was aiming for simplicity here and it bit me. I just wanted to take something that looked somewhat repetitive and kind of knock down the fact that I need 4 separate drop downs here and make it half that. It was like 60 lines of code I was eliminating by doing this. And if I have to keep adding and adding and adding, at some point I'm going to get to a point where I've gone full circle and created more code than I would have had just by putting 4 drop downs on the page. So it's chicken and egg, chasing my tail, however you want to call it. Yeah. So talk amongst yourselves. If you guys want to fight that fight, go for it. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it quits on trying to make this simpler and just be happy with what I have right now. The custom component route for that may not have been the perfect solution. What I have now works, and the validation summary will take care of it for me. Yeah, I will push that up. Let's see, where are we here? Changes, and we will so we have working cascading dropdowns. With validation, that's kind of eh. It's not perfect. Validation is what it is. Yep, feel free to play with it. Let me give that a push. Actually, let me do one more thing. I just noticed this is annoying. I don't need that. So I'm going to take that out, and I will amend that commit. Amend previous commit. So we don't have that line as a commit item. That should do it. Now I can push it. And that is under the refactoring the index branch. That should be available on GitHub. So let me just double check, make sure that got published correctly. We'll go up to GitHub and take a look. It may have been unnecessary refactoring that just ended up making me chase my tail, but I did find a lot of issues with the functionality of those drop-down boxes. Did I not publish this branch right? Yeah, I did solve a lot of problems by having that that little practice there, but why is this not showing? Push branch. Push branch. Wait for my little green arrow to show up, and then there we go. Now it should be up there. I could have swore I hit push before, It must have pushed master again and didn't have any changes, so there it is. This is the branch I'm working from. If you would like to fight that fire, go for it. I'm not sure it is worth my time to do. It's going to be one of those things where I end up either going back to putting these 2 forms or 4 forms back up on the page, or it's just gonna end up being this big control that ends up being more than, like I said, it was to save me 60 lines and it's already at 66, so it's gonna end up being a big monstrosity of stuff. We'll take another stab at it after the next update, because this value expression thing is going to go away. But it did help me understand, like, if I put these components inside of a child component, there are some quirks with it. The model binding doesn't seem to be the same inside of a child component. So the bind doesn't work. Yeah, it should go away in the next release, I believe. I think the compiler will be able to tell what it is we're trying to do. So I think it's going to be a tooling fix that eliminates that. So right now, if we pull that out, we get an error here. Actually, the error is at runtime. So I think they will be able to identify what T is, what the type is that the expression should satisfy, and then it will be able to eliminate that. So I think that's what it is. If you want to see the issue, docs.telerik.com, and it is under our select list, which we will implement eventually. Just trying to keep everything as native as possible until I'm ready to do some refactoring of the entire app in general, and we'll pull in the Telerik stuff and really knock out some of these pages. I just want to show what the difference is really between just regular Bootstrap and writing things yourself versus having something pre-built out of the box. So if we look at this issue, this is the actual issue here. Event callback not working as expected. And it goes on for quite a bit, actually. This has VS tooling impact, so that's why I'm saying there's tooling that needs to be involved. There's related issues. It got added in 7, so this is the actual resolution for it, preview 7. Add support for type converter. So it is able to look at it's able to look at the fields, I believe, and figure out what type that is needed. So we'll see. They solved quite a few problems with this bit here. So type converter for parameters. Let's see what this looks like. So it may be something that we set in a parameter attribute or something like that, but it will get fixed. It has to do with bind value. It's related to the data binding stuff. When you take data binding out, then it's still looking for a value. So it'll get fixed. We'll see how it gets fixed and what effect it has on that code, and we'll come back and look at that next week. I think it'll be in by next week, so we shall see if on Wednesday next week we can go back and take that out or not, and see what that does. So good stuff there. I'm not sure where I want to take this next. Let me think about what we can work on next. I want to get away from just hashing out this form forever. I think we spent enough time on the form. What I probably need to do is figure out how I want to calculate distance. Because right now distance is hard-coded. And we need some way of getting a distance between our 2 points. Now that we can select our points. I wish there was a way to make all of this run faster. Opening apps that I don't need doesn't help. So if you're playing the drinking game at home, I just opened Visual Studio Code by accident for the first time today. So what I want to do, I think, next is I want to calculate a distance of some kind between the 2 points that are selected. Don't know how I'm going to do this yet. So I want to say if I take off from Cape Canaveral and I want to land on the moon, the Sea of Tranquility, how do I get to that distance? We could probably just roughly get some distances online. And it's awesome that it is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing while we're working on this. So that is pretty cool. Coincidence, not planned.
Sequence start.
I don't need to see a video, not right now. We could say Earth to moon distance. And there we go. There's a distance. So we could use some predetermined distances. I know that these distances actually change, but I don't think that's going to matter for our app. Maybe something that we want to incorporate into our app at a later date. Exactly. Well, the distance. It is a straight line, but it isn't how you get to it. You don't take a straight line to get to the moon necessarily. I mean, you could measure the distance as a straight line, but getting there, it won't go into a whole thing. I'm not a rocket surgeon, so I don't know exactly how it's done. So I may be speaking out of turn, but you're actually going to launch ahead of the object you're trying to reach. Yeah, exactly. And you're going to approach it in an arc. And then there's also an elliptical orbit, that it's not a perfectly circular orbit. So at different times of the year, there is a slight variation as to how far the Earth is from the moon. So there's going to be some interesting things that I need to figure out, whether I want to tackle those or just make it kind of fictional and make believe. We also have the ability to go from the moon to Mars and stuff like that. So those are other distances we need to figure out. And then just book the tickets through SpaceX and then take the price and display it here. That'll work. So yeah, we'll figure it out though. We'll come up with an idea, whether it's factual or not, just to get a value that we can use for our app, and then we'll populate this price. And again, this price is going to change too. I'm just using the ML stuff just to exercise with the machine learning stuff. It's using taxi information. So what we'll probably do is when we go in and get our price, we'll probably just multiply it by 100 or something like that to come up with something that is a little more believable than $9. So maybe we'll multiply by 1,000, right? So maybe if we have a passenger that is going from the Earth to Mars and they land on Mars, it will be more than $9.38. It'd be like $9,380 or something, or 90,000. I'll come up with my own measurement system. This will be my own universe where laws do not apply to me. I mean, it's obviously not going to be factual at all, but at least it could be within the realms of some reality. um, we got to make it believable, I think. Yeah. So there's that. We'll make it believable, and then we'll build a story around it. That's my campaign for 2020. I won't go there. So this is our app so far, and we'll hash this out. I'll strategize what I want to do for distances soon. It'll probably be something very simple and hard-coded that are based on the real distances that are out there. Like, for example, I just grabbed one here, Earth to Moon distance. It's going to vary, but not extremely. This is a good rough estimate that we can use. And then there is Earth to Mars, and we could take that distance, which is a much bigger distance. This one is 33.9 million miles, and this is only hundreds of thousands of miles. So that is a much greater distance. So there will need to be some number tweaking that we do when we come up with our price. It'll be fun. That's all I can say. It may not be factual. It will be fun, though. And that is the point. Peter wins the internet today. That was too good. I mean, obviously, that is the correct answer. We don't do these things because they are easy, but because they are hard, as a wise man once said. That is too perfect, Peter. All right. We've got 8 folks here. It is Friday. I am ready for a weekend. Why don't we go rejoin Mr. Jeff Fritz and see how his pizza is going? He is building the Blazing Pizza app that was designed by no other than none other than the famous Steve Sanderson. So I've got some memes that I added to my stream here, and I saw this on the internet the other day. I thought this was hilarious. It has nothing to do with Steve Sanderson, but I thought when people watch Steve Sanderson do his presentations, like, this is what they see. Like, that's him on stage. That's my Steve Sanderson meme now. So I've got that. And then, of course, Blazor fans. We've got some more memes here. So we'll leave you with that fun. And we'll go rejoin Mr. Jeff Fritz building his pizza app. With I'll exit with the Steve Sanderson meme going, and we'll go raid Mr. Jeff Fritz now. So thank you guys for coming in, joining me in my insanity of drop-down boxes this week. And we're gonna wrap up the whole drop-down box thing, and we will hit the new problem of calculating some distances and whatnot next week. So thanks again. Have a good weekend, guys. Say hi to Jeff for me.